Welcome to Body Kindness. I'm Rebecca Scritchfield, creator of the Body Kindness Philosophy book and audiobook. I'm here to help you create a better life by reinventing health from the body oppressive, shaming, and you'll never be enough type of mindset to positive and joyful ways that you can spiral up your energy, mood, and your well-being at any size, shape, or weight, and as you are right now. Get started for free at bodykindnessbook.com/start. That's the sound of me smashing a stack of scales in front of some friends. And I have to say that breaking up with the scale and all the other ways I was judging, monitoring, and measuring my worth was absolutely pivotal in my life. Creating the Body Kindness philosophy and letting myself be a human being again helped me become a better mom, a better clinician, and a happier and healthier person. I believe we all have a right to decide how we want to care for ourselves, and I think we all need support in figuring out what that looks like. You don't have to do this alone. There's a whole community of like-minded people who are fed up with diets, who are embracing intuitive eating, and who are completely redefining their lives from body shame to body kindness. You are not broken. Our culture is. Find your inner caregiver and create a better life with body kindness.
One of the reasons that people end up having negative experiences around movement is because we perceive the purpose of movement as being to burn calories or to improve physical health. Of course, it can improve physical health, but that we've so limited our understanding of what the value of movement is, both in the immediate, the experience we can have while moving, and how it changes us in ways that gives us access to our best selves and to mental well-being. That's the shift that happened. It shouldn't even be a question of, I don't even want to have a conversation, about weight at this point. To me, it is not the purpose, and it is a huge distraction to getting the benefits of movement.
That was Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She's a health psychologist and lecturer at Stanford University who specializes in understanding the mind-body connection. Her mission is to translate insights from psychology and neuroscience into practical strategies that support personal well-being and strengthen communities. She's a best-selling author of The Willpower Instinct and the Upside of Stress. Her new book, The Joy of Movement, explores why physical exercise is a powerful antidote to the modern epidemics of depression, anxiety, and loneliness. I was so grateful to sit down with Dr. McGonigal and have this conversation. I love her new book. It's my go-to resource that I'm going to be recommending to clients and clinicians so that we can help people reframe their relationship to movement in their bodies. I love the stories Dr. McGonigal shares in the book. I love how practical she is with the science. This is exactly what we need in diet culture where we know the fitness world is really messed up. A book like this that is going to be inclusive of weight and age differences and abilities, and is by someone who knows what she's talking about. So I think you're going to get a lot out of our conversation today. I hope you pick up the book. You can get the book or audiobook wherever the books are sold. And also don't forget to check out her TED Talk. So if you like TED Talks like I do, hers is called How to Make Stress Your Friend. It's one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time with over 20 million views. And as you're listening, if you're thinking that you would like to connect to the body kindness community, here's what you want to do. bodykindnessbook.com/start. Get your free mini course. You'll get an invitation to our Facebook group that's called Body Kindness Insiders, and we would love to have you. Thanks and enjoy the show. Kelly McGonigal, welcome to Body Kindness.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you, not just about exercise, because I love exercise, and I happen to know that you have a certain experience and relationship and view of exercise as well. But also, just it's a personal honor for me to get some of your time. And I don't know how much of this backstory you know, but when I was writing Body Kindness, I knew I needed to talk about stress. And I actually bought The Upside of Stress. That's how I first came to know you. So I bought The Upside of Stress, and I listened to that while I was on my walks. And I was just floored. And I remember there's a part in your book where you talked about the people who feel like stress is always going to kill them. I'm like, that's me. Enthusiastic. And you really helped me shift my whole perspective about stress. And it was really fundamental as I started to kind of delve into positive psychology more and more. It really changed the way I thought about stress showing up in my life. I think it helped me cope with my anxieties better, and it really helped me as a clinician as well. So I appreciate all of that work. And it was even referenced in Body Kindness. And so I know a lot of listeners have listened to Bernie and I talk about The Upside of Stress. We book club that early on in the show. And it's just such a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably how I found you. I must have seen a podcast episode early on. And of course, you wouldn't have known from that book how interested I am in the body kindness movement. And so it's wonderful. We're coming together from both directions.
It's amazing. Well, listeners may not know all of your story about what you do professionally and the books that you have out there. So I would love it if you could just share a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm trained as a research psychologist, and my research over the years has focused on basically the mind-body relationship, how we can deal with difficult emotions like stress or anger, and also how people can form supportive social networks, and how we can deepen compassion for others and for ourselves. And that's sort of been like that's my work as a psychologist. But for the past 20 years, I've also been teaching group movement, particularly yoga and dance. And I've always viewed that as sort of an extension of my work as a psychologist. I think that there's very few things that are as good for your mental health as moving, and particularly moving in a supportive community. And so, what I feel like I'm doing now with this book is finally bringing together both of my worlds, sort of fully integrating and fully acknowledging and appreciating how movement can actually be a great tool for dealing with difficult emotions and becoming more resilient to stress, and particularly building supportive community and even cultivating compassion for ourselves and for others. So I'm super excited that now I can bring those two threads together, because of course, teaching movement for the past 2 decades has been the greatest joy of my professional life, but it's been in a more sort of private way. Now I'm taking it out in the world.
Here's what I love about this. Well, first of all, the name of the book is called The Joy of Movement: How Exercise Helps Us Find Happiness, Hope, Connection, and Courage, which amazing job on the title. And honestly, what I loved, and I love that you wrote this to bring it out in the world, because I knew right away, I was like, oh, this is going to be like Body Kindness for exercise. Like, I wrote a chapter. This is the book. So I am going to be recommending it wholeheartedly. I've already read it cover to cover. You did such a great job with it. And I definitely want to delve into some conversations around the concept of finding joy in movement, the concepts of how exercise can help support mental health and our social credentials. Before we do that, I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge my privilege, because I am credentialed as an exercise physiologist and I'm able-bodied. I've been exercising, since I was playing, I guess, right? And even just adopting that adult version of exercise probably came into my life easily by early years in high school. And I really haven't stopped. And I think that experience lends a lot to my credential. And also, my experience having thin privilege and not being a higher weight person in exercise, I know firsthand that I do not have to put the emotional effort into movement, into the microaggressions and everything like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that in this conversation, that is part of where, we're going to have a great conversation, and it's going to become from a person with thin privilege.
Yes. And, this is something that has been really important to me, particularly because I'm so focused on building community and viewing movement as an opportunity really find belonging and to strengthen a sense of self sort of in whatever direction is meaningful to you, to sense your own strength, to sense your own beauty, to sense your own possibilities, and for that to be true no matter what body you are in. So like you, I have been exercising for a long time. From my appearance, I look like I'm physically healthy and I am thin. And that often leads people to make a lot of assumptions about sort of what I care about and who this book is for. And in the book, one thing that people will notice pretty quickly is that the stories and the communities that I'm talking about include people with severe challenges to movement. For example, the Dance for Parkinson's Disease community, adaptive fitness in Fairfax, Virginia, where almost everyone training there has a serious physical disability or is recovering from traumatic brain injuries. And in my own communities where I teach, certainly if you would walk in the room, you would not see a room full of the stereotypically sort of, young, thin, fit people. And one of the most important messages of this book is that the joys of movement are available to you no matter what body you're in and no matter what your physical capacity is. And that sort of our responsibility for those of us who are in the movement world, what we can to get rid of all of the barriers that can really prevent people from experiencing that, whether it's on the messaging and the way that people with different body types are treated or talked about. That it's sort of our responsibility as an industry to try to challenge that directly. And also, I just want to speak to anyone listening to know that this is, even though those challenges are there, internal challenges as well as the very sort of real challenges that people face when they are in the world moving their bodies, that there is no physical limitation that prevents one from experiencing the joys we're going to talk about.
Oh, that's so good to know. I definitely want to delve further with you on that. And it is really meaningful and powerful. Bernie and I went, so I needed CEUs this year. And so we went to the American College of Sports Medicine Health and Fitness Summit. And that's where I have my credential. And it was in Chicago. So I was like, Bernie, do you want to go to this with me? We actually recorded a series of podcasts because he was actually re-entering his experiences in group fitness while getting training to work on his personal trainer certificate. And it was not very friendly toward him. And we talked about that. I mean, to the point of somebody, like this instructor thinking that they're being supportive, talking about, I want to hurt you today, like really off the wall. Anyone would say this is not helpful. And we would like stop and roll our eyes and look at other people in the audience. And here's what was interesting. There's a lot of, so this was in the audience was, students who are going to become athletic trainers or personal trainers or professional personal trainers. And there was a lot more people in the audience kind of saying, some of this stuff this isn't helpful. This isn't what I'm looking for. And I think it's important to acknowledge that people within the system who already have that privilege and access need to speak up and work actively to change the system. So whether that is higher weight people becoming fitness professionals or, people with disabilities becoming fitness professionals, we need to open up those spaces for more inclusivity and also really take a hard look at, does the fitness culture really want to be aligned with diet culture, which is known to be oppressive and harmful to health? Or do we want to actually find the right sub-community, right, within this fitness world to actually change it so that we make it better and safer for everyone to access movement?
I mean, I even, the word fitness is not something that I'm particularly in love with because I do not view the purpose of movement as getting fit. I certainly don't view the purpose of movement as losing weight. I view my work as adjacent to that. I think of myself as somebody who is creating experiences that in the moment give people a sense of joy or a sense of empowerment, that build relationships, that create communities of mutual support, and that ultimately allow people to experience life differently because the movement itself is changing the brain in ways that give you more courage and more resilience, that can be a therapy for depression and anxiety, that make us more sensitive to pleasure and joy in the world. I could care less about the thing that the industry has really made its priority. And so, one of the first comments that both of my editors made about this book is they realized at the end of it that I hadn't mentioned weight or weight loss at all in the book, other than individuals who wanted to be identified as fat in the book, just for that kind of visibility. And I really feel like this is something that the conversation has to change. One of the reasons that people end up having negative experiences around movement is because we perceive the purpose of movement as being to burn calories or to improve physical health. Of course, it can improve physical health, but that we've so limited our understanding of what the value of movement is, both in the immediate, the experience we can have while moving, and how it changes us in ways that gives us access to our best selves and to mental well-being. That's the shift that happened. It shouldn't even be a question of, I don't even want to have a conversation, about weight at this point. To me, it is not the purpose, and it is a huge distraction to getting the benefits of movement.
Yeah. Say it louder for the people in the back.
I know.
I am with you. That was really beautifully stated. And is that kind of why you felt this book was urgently needed?
Well, so it was needed in the sense for me as well, because, most of the books I write have been about suffering. I sort of like suffering as my natural orientation to life. And I was at a point in my life where I wanted to focus on joy. And I loved the idea of writing a book that most of my books have given people strategies for dealing with the most difficult things, dealing with trauma or loss or mental health challenges. And initially I thought this book was not going to be that, although of course it turned into that because, of how people use movement to deal with grief and loss and trauma and depression and anxiety. But it has a quality of joy to it that I really wanted to just allow myself to focus on. They say that when you write a book, you have to become the person who can write that book. And it was almost a gift to myself to say, I really want to focus on how much joy it brings me to move and to share movement with communities, and to have that be the focus of my life for the next, say, 5 years or so. Sort of books take on that amount of time in my life. And what I hoped to do with the book was, again, to write a book that did a couple of things. It's not a book that's meant to convince people to move. I'm really not like a salesperson, but I wanted to first and foremost talk to people who already know that movement can serve this function. And I wanted to say to people, it is not selfish to choose movement and make it a priority in your life. Like, let me explain to you how it's changing the brain, how it makes you a better parent or partner, how it is the most powerful thing you can do for your mental health. Let me explain some of the science of that to you, so that when you are making a choice to practice yoga or run or dance or lift weights, that you understand that there's a reason this matters so much to you and you're not crazy, and that we can celebrate everything that movement does for you. I wanted to write a book that really speaks to people who have discovered the joys of movement and allow them to almost like deepen their love affair with movement. And then by sharing those stories, to give people who haven't fallen in love yet, maybe because maybe they're like me and had traumatic experiences growing up around movement and being body shamed in, phys ed or in other settings. And so, I'm very lucky I discovered the joys of movement. I could have easily gone in the other direction because of some of my early experiences around movement and exercise. And I wanted to show a picture of what it can look like that is really about falling in love with movement as a way to fall in love with yourself and your life. And to develop these human capacities for things like courage and hope and connection. And that by telling people stories of how, movement can save you from suicidal thinking, or how movement created a community that gets you through a difficult time in your life, that people can have a new vision of what you exercise for and how you do it. and what you can get out of it, that rather than trying to convince people to do it, really changes what people imagine is possible for themselves. And then hopefully that'll be then if you're somebody who hasn't fallen in love with movement yet, it changes where you go to move. And maybe because you're not thinking that exercise is about losing weight or making your body more acceptable to others, then perhaps it makes more sense for you to have a dance party in your living room with your kid rather than go to the gym and sign up to, do something that is going to make you miserable. Or maybe you decide to go for a walk in nature because you're starting to think about the joys of the self-transcendence that you feel when you're in a beautiful setting and taking some time for yourself to really explain what some of these joys are so that people can choose joy and put joy first as sort of what they're chasing through their relationship with movement.
Mm-hmm. So this is interesting because it reminded me of the typical questions I'll get from listeners of the show. And there was an episode where we answered a listener question, and it was hilarious in the way she framed it out, but it was like, I hate exercise. I want to knit, I want to play with my dog, and don't tell me to walk my dog. What would you say to someone like me? And Bernie and I both enjoyed answering her question, but a lot of that really is it. I think that there is this identity, right? To say something like, I'm not an exerciser, or I hate exercise, right? If someone's coming from that place, they're not connecting like the fleeting sense of joy to movement at all. They're probably more thinking pain and suffering, right? Or the fact that they could become a person who connects joy to movement in like a long-term emotional sense. So I would love to get your reaction or response for those who are like, gosh, the joy of movement sounds amazing. And that is so not me. Like, what would you say to that kind of person?
Yeah. So it is, I think that for every person, there are going to be forms of movement that just are not for you and do not produce joy. It's funny that, the first chapter of my book is about the runner's high, and I'm not a runner, and you really can't pay me to run. I'm not therefore. But I was interested in exploring why people fall in love with different forms of movement. So I was so fascinated by how many people I talked to thought they hated exercise. I mean, and I don't mean that they were mistaken about it. They really did hate every form of exercise done in their lives. And then they found something that gave them a different experience of movement. For I remember one woman, it was around gardening in her backyard, and not just planting things, but like hauling away, the things that she had to like whack down in order to clear out the space. And like what it felt like to like haul dirt and haul, plants and things she'd cut down, and how productive she felt and how strong she felt. I feel like that for a lot of people, I was just met this one woman, she discovered the joy of jumping on top of things. And this is like such a weirdly idiosyncratic movement, but she thought she didn't like to exercise, and she saw videos of people jumping on things like in public, and then learning how to jump on top of a bench or to jump on top of things in public. And now she feels so powerful, and she like jumps, and that's her form of movement. Like, this is not the typical thing that people are going to say when they convince you to try to exercise. That finding the joy of movement is often about figuring out an actual kind of movement that connects you to joys that are fundamentally human, like a sense of purpose, or the pleasure that comes from moving to music, which is one of my biggest joys. And that it doesn't even have to look like exercise. You put on a song that has amazing groove, and you see if you want to roll around on the floor to it or clap your hands and lip sync for your life. That's movement. That it can be about going places or being places, like in natural settings, being in different environments. So many people told me how being in water feels so different than being on land, and whether they were learning to swim for the first time as an adult, or returning to swimming as a movement form, or doing water exercise classes like yoga or aerobics in the water, and the feeling of buoyancy and how that can relieve feelings of pain or feelings of discomfort in the body for a wide variety of reasons. That finding the joy of movement isn't necessarily about like making yourself like what people have told you exercise should be like. It is about thinking about a way of engaging with life that is embodied. And there are a lot of things that maybe you wouldn't label exercise, that are physical and that give you a different sense of being in your body so that you understand either what your body is for, or you literally sense yourself as different when you're doing that activity. One of the areas of science that I find so fascinating is about how different movement qualities create different emotions and a different sense of self. So like if you throw something, and you throw something with speed and with power and force, you actually get physical signals from your muscles and your tendons and your joints that travel to your brain that don't just tell your brain you just threw something. Those sensory signals tell your brain you're powerful. You generate force. And it doesn't take much for the brain to translate that into you make things happen. And that every movement we do can have that kind of emotional quality or that sort of psychological resonance. So sometimes thinking that you hate exercise, I've talked to a number of women lately who have been taken up throwing axes. And when you throw an axe, like, okay, that is a different experience than getting on a treadmill and watching the calorie counter creep up and like, why? And for me, it's often about putting on the right playlist. I mean, I can transform almost any experience into something positive, even things I hate, like being on a plane in turbulence. I can turn almost any experience into something positive by the quality of the lyrics that I'm listening to. And, some really interesting research looking at how women in particular interpret the physical sensations of effort, and how one of the key distinctions between people who think they hate exercise and people who enjoy exercise is not how hard it is. Not whether their muscles are like, this is hard, I want to stop. Whether their brain is like, this is too much, I want to stop. How much they're sweating. It's not how hard it is. It's in that moment of maybe struggling to breathe and your heart rate is going up and you're sweating. Are you saying something to yourself like, this is proof that I'm out of shape? Or this is embarrassing that I'm sweating so much? Or do you take those same physical symptoms and say to yourself, like, wow, my heart is pounding. I am getting stronger. I am strengthening my heart. Or I'm out of breath. I just pushed myself. I feel amazing. I made that happen. And one of the things that I'm fascinated by is how the music that we listen to can actually move us in the direction of understanding these sensations. So often people use to judge themselves to say, I'm out of shape. I am too weak. I can't do this. Those same sensations become signals of how amazing you are, how fierce you are, how far you have come and what is possible. I could go on, but it's often, it may absolutely be the case that you've hated everything you've ever done, but that doesn't mean that the joys of movement aren't available to you. And the one thing I also say is that I've talked to a lot of people who came to movement late in life who literally didn't enjoy it until they did. And one of the things we know from the neuroscience of movement is that as we age, our brains naturally change in ways that create real vulnerabilities, cognitive vulnerabilities, loss of memory, challenges with movement, increased susceptibility to depression. And these are natural, not necessarily desirable consequences of aging. And these are things that exercise strongly counter. So often we become more receptive to the joys of exercise as we age because our brains literally need it more. And you are more likely to notice the effect of being active on your mood immediately. You're more likely to actually experience an antidepressant effect of movement as you become older. So sometimes we need to allow for the possibility that, maybe in your 20s, you didn't need to exercise. And maybe it felt like a chore, or you had negative experiences in communities that didn't support you or welcome you. But that may be very different when you're 40 and when you're 60 and when you're 80. And to really have this sense of opening to the possibilities that your relationship with movement can change as you change and your body changes and your brain changes. And so many people think it's the opposite, that like exercise is for the young and the already fit. And, I will tell you, a lot of the classes that I teach are to seniors, and the joys that they get from movement are so amplified compared to when they were younger and maybe their bodies looked like they could move with greater ease or greater strength. But the psychological and social benefits are so amplified later in life. So I would encourage people to stay open to possibilities.
There's so much that I love in what you said, but I have to say the client I had just before we got online to do our recording here, she was telling me about her mom, and her mom's first Pilates class was like when she was 70, and it was the first type of movement she ever stuck to. So I believe you 100%. And that gives me, as someone entering my mid 40s, gives me something to look forward to, just an evolving relationship to movement in my body. And I also wanted to respond to how fascinating it was to me to think about like sort of the natural response to like muscles or tendons or whatnot. Like there's this biological response that's like strength, power, achievement, right? And then it's our mind, right? Which we know is socially constructed. You suck, And so what do we do if we hear you suck or you can't handle this, and gently reframe that to like, well, I'm noticing my heart is beating really fast. Is this a sign that it's my heart working and it's okay to continue? Or do I want to take it down a notch? And that's okay too. I'm here and I'm present. So I love all that.
I think a huge part of this is you have to find a community that shares this mindset. So you mentioned Pilates, for example. And one thing that's so interesting, there's a huge wave of popularity of movement forms like Pilates and bar. And to some degree, yoga shares this as well, where we know that if you do the movements and you pay attention to how they feel, most people will feel strong, empowered. There's actually direct neurofeedback from the muscles of your core to the parts of your brain that regulate stress and anxiety. So literally by contracting your deep core muscles in any of these forms of exercise, you are literally creating a braver, more courageous, and more hopeful state of mind. It literally telling your brain, I've got this, I can handle this. There's a direct neurological link from your core muscles. But you could also find yourself doing those movements in an environment where people are like, this is how you get a flat tummy, or, all sorts of BS like that, where the messaging is literally interfering with how your mind could sort of naturally be interpreting the movements that you're doing and experiencing the benefits. So I really feel like for people who know they've got that voice in their own head, one of the first things you need to do is make sure you don't have that voice coaching you through the movement experience. People should, feel free to give people feedback on your way out the door and say, I didn't come here to hear that. But to go to places where you are coached to sense how movement feels, to appreciate your own strength. I always say I've trained a number of instructors in different movement forms. And I always say, like, when you're coaching something like a squat, the words out of your mouth should be, what does it feel like to stand in your own strength? Not, this is how you get long, lean legs. And people should be looking for the environments where the message that they're getting from the imagery to the coaching to whatever is allowing them to practice this new way of experiencing movement and thinking and feeling. And then because it's hard to do it all by yourself, and it really I don't think embracing yourself and your body as a do-it-yourself project as much as we can do it ourselves, more power to you. But I really believe that the environment contributes so much, and to look for those environments where you are supported through that. And again, I found that often you have to go slightly outside of the traditional fitness industry to do this. Talking to people who found rowing groups or running groups or walking groups, movement communities that are taking place in natural community centers, like at churches or in literally local community centers, that because people didn't show up there to fix their bodies, that's just not the dominant focus. Maybe choose to train for something like a charity, for a race that's raising monies, where the people there have a bigger than self cause, that they're there not to lose a certain number of pounds with a month of running, but because they're trying to honor someone that they care about with a particular issue. Like I would just say that's the number. If you struggle with those voices in your head, really don't make it like a do-it-yourself project where you're fighting the world. Go out and find the community and the places where you're getting different messages, so you don't work so hard to counter them.
So I got to tell you, I feel like I'm watching a magic show, and I'm like, oh, how'd they do that? Because I like validating everything that you were just saying. There's 3 different things I'm going to try to quickly say. Okay. So one was the sort of not so good. Well, so anyway, to summarize, we should find communities where we think we could belong, right? Where maybe a friend goes, where we think we might find something interesting. And we have that fear before we go, right? That first day of kindergarten fear, like, oh, it's like, go anyway, try to connect to others, try to connect the instructor. Don't expect that everybody's going to say and do everything perfectly, because people are human, but you should highly consider setting a boundary. You had mentioned like say something before you leave, but even if it's thinking about it and emailing later, but offering some boundaries and feedback for what you're looking for and what you expect in community. And it's great when you show up and it's already there. So the first example I could think of, and this is a workout I've been doing for a while, and it's mostly good. And this just happened today though, and I'm still kind of thinking about, okay, generous assumptions. You are going to say something. But it was in this it was a 6 a.m. class, right? That's already, I feel like I've succeeded just showing up. But we were doing this move for our hamstrings. We were on our backs. And she literally said to me, if your toes aren't touching, like the floor where they should be, I'm going to come and break them. I know. I couldn't believe it.
I don't even understand what that means.
I couldn't believe it. But guess what my body did right after she said it?
Well, please don't tell me that it improved the quality of your movement.
No.
Good.
I felt so weak. I laid down. I was on my back, but I'm supposed to be doing like a hamstring curl on my back. I stopped. I laid out straight like I was sleeping. And it wasn't visceral. I don't think I was making a conscious choice. I think I felt deflated because my toes weren't touching the thing. So what you were just saying, I'm like, yes, like that's what I'm saying. It's a magic trick. I just had this experience today. Okay, on the positive side. So one of the things that I do when the calendar works out is my daughter does a ballet class, and it's in Georgetown. So also in Georgetown is the Exorcist stairs, like where the film and the movie and the guy, it's the big crescendo, and it's literally like a national landmark. And so it's 3 flights of stairs, but it's the equivalent of a 5-story building. And so like sometimes I'm walking up and walking down and it's easy peasy. And, it's interesting. I kind of gauge my personal energy, and I'm always like, whatever I can put into it is fine, right? Well, one day I did like a couple sets. I'm like, I'm just not feeling it. I'm not really sure, just kind of blah. And it was still the beginning, and I was debating stopping. All of a sudden, what do you know? A group of 15 people come and they're like, let's go. Yeah, great job. High five and clapping. All of a sudden I'm like, I'm in your group. And I don't even know what they were there for. I didn't care. Maybe it was a wrong group. I didn't care. All I knew is being in that environment was like, oh, okay, I have this energy that I want to have. And if they can do it, maybe I can do it. And it was one of the best challenging workouts I've ever had. And it was a direct result of just that shift in who was there and what were they saying and how did I feel? I didn't have to think about it. It was very natural. And I think this is what you're kind of telling the listeners, like, and here's all the science behind it, if I'm right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I'll do my part talking to fitness professionals, which I do, and try to help change the culture and the environments that are out there. So, we'll sort of do that, what we can to change the culture and the environments people find when they walk into a movement experience. And then at the same time, know that every individual has the choice to look for the environments where they feel welcome. They're hearing the things that they want to hear, and also to create the communities that don't exist yet. One of the best ways this goes back to my previous research, the psychology stuff. And, I mentioned that I'm really interested in how people create support networks. And often the best way to find the quality of support that you want and need is to look for ways to create it for others. And yes, that takes a lot of energy and often a lot of courage. But if there is a type of support or community that you can't find that you want, to create it for other people, it ends up paying you back in so many ways that you end up the recipient of the sort of the support system that you try to set up for others. And there are lots of great examples of that in the movement world of people. I think of like the Unlikely Hikers community. Started out as one person who didn't feel represented in hiking activities and sort of the online stereotypes about who a hiker is. I think about the Girl Trek movement. So if there's anyone who's like, I want to explore a certain type of movement, And every time I've tried to show up, I feel like I'm not welcomed or it's just not for me, then maybe decide you're going to be the one who is the catalyst for making that available to other people like you who want to explore this movement form, but maybe want to do it in a different way.
Yeah, no, I think that's fabulous. And, I'm wondering, so if we've got this foundation of community and lots of different options that we could work with there, but I wonder if we can pivot to a conversation around mental health, because I know, I feel that in my life. Like, I feel like with movement, it's how I can sleep and manage my daytime energy. It's how I cope with anxieties and just life. And I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's more to that story. And I think it could be really motivating for folks, because it will be difficult things, making the time for movement, trying to find the right community, trying to deal with your thought bullies when you're there. So knowing that doing some difficult things will require effort, but then you will endure. Like, how can we kind of find, as a sense of motivation, this connection between movement and mental health?
Yeah, so I'll explain some of what I think are the most fascinating neuroscientific research findings that I feel like if you can appreciate, so you hear about endorphins, you're like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to exercise because in theory it's going to give me an endorphin rush and then I'll feel better. And people think that like, that's it. That's why exercise is good for mental health. The relationship between physical activity and mental health is wired into every system of our body in ways that are absolutely fascinating. And that often takes some time to unfold. So it's not the case that if you're suffering from severe depression, that you're going to feel like going for a walk or a run. And then as soon as you do it, you're going to feel better. That's really not how it works. Physical activity changes the brain in amazing and profound ways, but often over a time course of weeks and months and years. And so, sometimes the initial experience is every cell of my body is saying, I can't even get out of bed, let alone go to the gym. And yet, if you're able to get yourself out the door or get someone to pull you out of bed and go for a walk with you, like when you can get past that barrier, the way that physical activity alters our brains and our mental health is so amazing. So I want to give you two examples. The first is something called hope molecules. And this is the insight. Researchers have only discovered this in the past decade, that your muscles manufacture chemicals that affect every system of your body. And they only release those chemicals when you contract your muscles, particularly through exercise or physical activity. And that the chemicals that your muscles literally manufacture, like you've got a pharmacy in your muscles, in your quadriceps, in your calves, in your biceps, they're manufacturing chemicals that do amazing things for your health, that like fight cancer cells and reduce inflammation, and that also travel to your brain. So the muscles release them when you exercise. They're in your bloodstream. They cross the blood-brain barrier, and many of these chemicals change the long-term function and even structure of your brain to make you more resilient to stress, to help you recover from trauma, that can decrease the likelihood of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. And the only way to get these chemicals into your brain is by contracting your muscles. And one of the first researchers to write about this called them hope molecules because of the studies that showed that these chemicals that are released during exercise, particularly when in this particular study, animals were put through traumatic experiences, but if they had these high levels of circulating chemicals, it actually prevented them from becoming depressed and traumatized. So they were more resilient to stress. And the researchers dubbed them hope molecules, this idea that when you exercise, you're releasing chemicals into your bloodstream that can prevent depression and help you recover from trauma. So I think that's like an amazing insight, this idea that your muscles basically manufacture depressant chemicals that you can only access through movement, and that can give you a different brain, is protected from a lot of the things that we most want to defend against, like cognitive decline and depression. And the other that I wanted to mention is sort of a totally different avenue for how exercise affects mental health. has to do with how it affects the reward system of the brain. We know that the reward system of the brain is really important for motivation, for protecting against depression, for recovering from addiction and substance abuse. And when the reward system is not really robust, that's when you often are at increased risk of a lot of cognitive disorders and mental and emotional disorders. And a lot of the current most exciting treatments for depression and addiction recovery, substance abuse recovery, and even trauma recovery are looking for ways to jumpstart the reward system and make and strengthen it so that your brain is more sensitive to the ordinary joys of everyday life. So that food tastes good and you look forward to talking to a friend. Like just the simple stuff. A sunset is actually beautiful. Your brain's ability to imagine that if you engage in a task, you're going to feel good about it when you're done. Just so many ways that the reward system helps us stay engaged in life. Right now, a lot of the therapies are doing that through deep brain stimulation and drug treatment to try to get the reward system more robust. And what we know now is that exercise is one of the best ways to do that. And that exercise changes and strengthens the reward system in a way that can help the brain recover from past substance abuse and addiction, can recover from depression. And that the way it does it is not just by making the brain resilient to stress, like the other mechanism I talked about, but it literally makes your brain more sensitive to joy and better able to anticipate pleasure and possibility and hope. And again, like the other mechanism I talked about, this often takes some time to unfold. It's not the endorphin rush at the end of a hard run. It unfolds over weeks and months. And it's what makes exercise one of the best treatments we have for almost every type of mental health challenge.
Oh, that's so good and so powerful. And, I would just encourage listeners that if you had a past experience where, say, over-exercise was part of how you coped with difficulty in life. And so, it could look, just sort of like as a source of pain from the past, right? So with the right support team, the right rest of your body for the physical and mental health reasons, that there can be what it sounds like an opportunity to pivot to a new relationship to movement where it's a source of joy, right? It is joyful movement. It's not that source of, it's no longer going to be the thing you do that is punishing or, that you use in a judgmental way.
So when you mentioned that, my first thought, I actually thought you were talking about exercise dependence. Which is an interesting sort of proof of concept.
Okay.
So exercise is so powerful for mental health that, a small percentage of people will develop an unhealthy or destructive dependence on it because they're going through something difficult in their life. They're getting through a divorce or recovering from depression or whatever the situation is, and they start exercising. And it creates such a powerful and profound benefit for their mental health that people can develop a dependence on it that's like a dependence on a drug where you feel like you want more and more of it, and you start to organize your life around it. And so, sometimes people have to actually alter their relationship to movement because it was too good for them in a way that they kind of lost sight of exercise as something that you do to help you engage with your whole life, and it actually takes over your life. And it can require some real intervention. But I also think it's interesting that it really is that proof of concept,
Yeah,
that
I agree. You're right.
In that way. It's because it works.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, particularly when you're really suffering and it has been your life preserver, you can slide into an unhealthy dependence. But it is more often the case that it just becomes that life preserver that allows you to stay afloat and then get to better shores.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And, and I think the bottom line is, everyone's experience is unique, and just consider an open-minded way of being able to move on from, negative past experiences into something that could be more health promoting and life-giving because of the biology side of it and also the way that you frame it up in your life. I do have one more question. I want to make sure that we address social connection. I mean, we talked about the power of community. I think there is a social connection kind of like layered in there, but honestly, I know that, even like in the last part of Body Kindness, and I threw in like where you belong, because it's like, I know the pain point was I'm at diet rock bottom. I don't ever want to diet again, but I care about health. And it's like, sort of in this slow and gentle way, I'm giving guidance and everything like that. But really there's this whole reframe of what is, and again, it comes from obviously from positive psychology, about what does it mean to have a good life and a meaningful life? And that is where I learned so much truly about the power and benefits about social connection. But my attitude before I actually delved into the study was just like, yeah, who has the time for that? That's frivolous. Like, I've got things to do. And I think that's very culturally driven. And I would love for you as the expert to connect, a better understanding for people, that it's not just a frivolous thing that we say, like connect to others, that it truly is mental well-being, basic human need, and that there's, however you would want to connect that to experiencing the joy movement. I would love to hear from you on that.
Yeah.
Piece.
Well, I mean, so I'm going to be completely biased.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to ask me, how do you define mental health and happiness?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would actually put at the very center of that definition, feeling connected to others and feeling like you're connected to something bigger than yourself, and you're able to contribute in a way that you value and that is valued by others. So, for me, the idea that there's anything else is kind of like, what else are you doing besides connecting? So, you can make arguments. Like, I know it's very sexy right now. There's this one study that found that being lonely is worse for your health than smoking a whatever bazillion cigarettes a day.
Mm-hmm.
And people often will try to sell social connection like you need to be connected because it's good for your health.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's bad for your heart to not be connected.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I mean, to me, that's like selling the joys of movement to help people lose weight. It's the inherent good is there. What else is there besides either connection to people you care about close in your life, broader community, and a purpose greater than yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know why we're alive if that's not the central purpose of our lives. So in a way, like I don't even know how to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
It's me. That's my orientation to life. And you don't have to embrace it, but that's just the way that I think about things. And the reason that I think movement is so exciting as an avenue for connection, this is something that I learned writing the book and researching the book. I knew it from a lived experience that when you find a community where you belong and you're having positive experiences of movement, I knew that it built social support and belonging in a way that I didn't see in a lot of other places in my life. But I learned from researching this book that when we move our bodies, the neurochemistry that takes place, you could basically describe it as having two main effects. One is it makes us more hopeful. And the other is that it primes us to connect with others and to bond with others and to trust others. So for example, the fundamental basis of the runner's high, which you can get from not only running, you can get from any activity that gets your heart rate up a little bit that you stick with for, like 20 minutes, that I call it a persistence high, not a runner's high, that this exercise induced high, the main neurochemical change is increasing endocannabinoids, which make you feel more optimistic and increase the pleasure that you get from connecting with others, whether you're playing, cooperating, shared laughter, how good a hug feels, higher levels of endocannabinoids just make it feel better to connect with others. And that's the neurochemistry of the runner's high. Like, movement primes us to reduce any kind of social anxiety and to enhance the pleasure that we get from connecting and cooperating and spending time and being with one another. And a higher intensity exercise probably also releases oxytocin, which is an even more powerful bonding hormone. And we know that moving in synchrony with others also releases endorphins alongside of the endocannabinoids. That endorphins is really it's a biological mechanism for increasing trust and bonds among people. When you have an endorphin rush with other people, it's that experience bonds you and makes you feel more connected. It makes you feel more trusting, and it makes you feel better about yourself, like you belong. And it's fascinating to me. It's not like this is a subset of the neurochemistry of movement. This is the neurochemistry of movement. There's not a whole lot of other stuff going on. You're getting, it's a little bit of that dopamine and adrenaline rush that makes you feel like you have more energy, that sort of optimism effect. But other than that, basically what movement does is it primes us to connect with others. And even being in nature can enhance this effect by helping us feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. That's sort of or flow movements like yoga and Tai Chi and swimming can also help us feel that kind of transcendence, so that we feel connected not only to other people, but we feel connected to the world at large in a way that's really comforting and empowering. And so I think this is because my mission in life is to help people feel less alone and to feel more like they have something to offer the world, and that the world is a welcoming place for them. Like, that essentially is my goal. My goal is not to make people exercise. I'm not trying to trick people into exercising by selling, the benefits. I actually believe that movement is one of the most powerful ways to experience that kind of sense of contributing and positive social belonging.
Yeah. And really what you're talking about is a total reframe from exercise to connect it more to well-being and what it means to exist as a human. And that we can reject the cultural narrative, we can disassociate it from diet culture in our own sense of values. And you are very selective in your words of choosing movement, choosing joy, that this helps us make this powerful reframe so that it can have the deeper meaning that that really does help us feel better and feel like our life is better.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the most poignant examples that I came across in my research was how movement was being used in hospice centers. Mm-hmm. People at the end of their lives who really, they're not, no matter how much they exercise, they're not curing their cancer or reversing their aging or any other thing like that. And to imagine that at the end of life, often what people were choosing to do was to go to this exercise center within the hospice center and do whatever they could do physically, whatever was still possible. And when they explained why, they said three things. One is, when I'm moving, it's when I feel hope. And it's not even hope connected to anything. It's just hope. And when I'm moving, it's how I know I'm alive. That sense of I'm here in my body and I'm using my body and I'm alive. And the third was, and it's how I connect with others. And it's a wonderful way to spend time with others. And I feel like if you understand that even at the end of life, people would choose to use their precious minutes to move their body as a way to experience hope and a sense of vitality and aliveness and connection with others, when you understand that even then, that this is a choice that people make when they pay attention to their direct experience, you start to understand how powerful movement is and how important it is to choose it in whatever way we can with the body that we have now and the capacity that we have now to move as long as we can in whatever way we can.
Wow. I actually never thought of it that way, but it seems like a very powerful thought to take with me and to leave the listeners with as well. It's been such a wonderful conversation and a joy to talk to you. So the book is The Joy of Movement, How Exercise Helps Us Find Happiness, Hope, Connection, and Courage. It's available.
Yep. Oh, and Bernie makes a little appearance in it. Did you catch his guest appearance?
You know what? I told him that when I found it, I would let him know.
It's in chapter 4 okay. on Let Yourself Be Moved, about the joy of music.
Okay.
And I share his stories about dancing with his daughter. And the joy that comes from the dance parties that he has with his daughter.
He's going to love that, because when I told him you and I were talking, he was like, did I make the book? I was like, I'll ask her.
And you know what? And it has nothing to do with weight.
Oh, I love it.
It has to do with joy and how moved I was by his stories about dancing with his daughter.
Oh, he'll love that. I can't wait to find that and share that with him. And I can't wait to devour the audiobook on my walks in nature as well. I love listening to your voice too. So that's, I definitely like to hold a book in my hand and everything like that. But I also I think I learn a lot more by listening too. So
I did record the audiobook.
Yay!
So often listeners can judge. If you're tired of this voice, then read the actual book.
Trust me, I loved listening to you talking Upside of Stress. So it will be a winner. And the book is definitely so wonderful and an amazing conversation. Where can folks find and follow you after they buy the book and they love everything? I'm sure you've got a website or something that you'd like to share.
Yeah, people can find me by my name, KellyMcGonigal.com, and on all the social media channels, but that's my home base.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much for coming on Body Kindness.
Thank you, and thanks for everything you do.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.